The parking lot lights flickered as a woman stood between a crying boy and 3 men twice her size. Her hands shook, but she refused to move. The night pressed in until the low growl of engines rolled through town, announcing that her fight was about to be shared. Before we start this story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Also, please subscribe to the channel. It will help us to bring you more inspiring stories every day. In the small mountain town of Pinecrest Valley, life was quiet, but not always kind. Jenna Whitlow, a single mother raising her daughter alone, worked long hours at the hardware store and spent evenings cooking simple meals in their 2-room apartment. Across the hall lived Evan Burke, a timid 10-year-old often left to himself while his father worked the late shift. Jenna's daughter, Rosie, adored Evan, often inviting him over for board games and dinner. Jenna noticed the boy's shy gratitude, how he lingered at their door just to hear laughter. One Saturday evening, as Jenna carried groceries home, she spotted Evan cornered by 3 older teens behind the strip mall. They shoved him, mocking his worn sneakers and stutter. Without thinking, Jenna dropped her bags and marched forward. "Enough," she snapped, pulling Evan behind her. But the smirks on their faces told her the confrontation was far from over. The teens laughed, circling closer. "What are you gonna do, lady? Call his daddy?" one sneered, flicking Evan's cap to the ground. Jenna's heart pounded, but her stance didn't falter. She spread her arms, shielding the boy. "You're done," she said firmly, though her voice trembled. Rosie peeked from their apartment window across the lot, her small face pale. Fear coiled in Jenna's stomach, but retreat was never an option. "Go inside, honey," she shouted. Rosie hesitated, then ran, tears streaking down her cheeks. Jenna prayed she would find help, but Pinecrest Valley wasn't known for stepping in. The tallest teen leaned forward, his shadow swallowing her. "You think you can protect him?" His words dripped with menace. Jenna swallowed hard. "I know I can." But even as the words left her lips, doubt clawed at her. Then, faint in the distance, a sound began to rumble. Low, steady, growing louder by the second. The roar built until the pavement itself seemed to vibrate. Headlights split the darkness as a line of Harleys rolled into the lot, chrome catching the flicker of broken lamps. Tires crunched gravel as 81 riders parked in formation, engines idling like thunder held at bay. The teens froze, their bravado leaking into panic. Jenna turned, stunned, as one figure stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his vest heavy with patches. His voice cut through the night. "Is there a problem here?" Silence answered him. The teen stammered, eyes darting to the wall of men behind him. Evan clutched Jenna's sleeve, trembling. The biker's gaze narrowed. "Didn't think so." At a single nod, half the angels dismounted, their boots echoing like drums on the pavement. The teens bolted, sneakers slapping the asphalt as they disappeared into the dark. Relief washed over Jenna, but she knew this was only the beginning. Engines clicked as they cooled, the night air thick with the scent of gasoline and leather. Jenna stood frozen, Evan still pressed to her side. The lead biker extended a gloved hand. "Name's Rhett Callahan," he said, his voice rough but steady. "We look out for people who stand up when no one else will." Jenna blinked, speechless. Rhett's eyes softened just enough to ease her fear. "Word travels quick. Your little girl ran for help. She found us." At that, Jenna's chest tightened. Rosie emerged timidly from behind one of the bikes, her hand resting against the chrome as if it were a shield. "Mama, I told them you were brave," she whispered. Rhett knelt, meeting Rosie's gaze. "Your mama's more than brave. She's family now." The words sank deep, heavier than Jenna could grasp. For the first time that night, she wasn't just fighting alone. The angels didn't leave. Instead, they walked Jenna and the children back to the apartment, their boots heavy on the stairwell. Neighbors cracked open doors, eyes wide as the building filled with the scent of leather and exhaust. In her kitchen, Jenna poured glasses of water with shaking hands. Rhett leaned against the counter, his presence filling the small space. "Harassment like that doesn't end in one night," he said plainly. "Those kids? They'll come back meaner, maybe bring others." Jenna's heart sank. "Then what am I supposed to do?" Rhett glanced at his brothers gathered in the doorway, patches catching the lamplight. His answer was simple. "You won't have to do it alone. When you fight for someone else's kid, you fight for all of ours. And we don't forget that." Outside, engines revved softly, their promise carried in every vibration. The message was clear. Jenna had family now. The next morning, Pinecrest Valley buzzed with rumors. Some praised Jenna for standing up, others whispered she was foolish for getting involved. At the hardware store, her manager muttered, "You don't want trouble with those kids' families. They've been in it before." Jenna kept her head down, but unease followed her like a shadow. That evening, as she walked Rosie and Evan home from school, she noticed the same boys lingering at the corner, joined by two older men with hard stares. "This isn't over," one called out. Jenna gripped Rosie's hand tighter. Fear rippled through her, but she didn't falter. Hours later, when the sound of motorcycles echoed down the street, relief washed over her. The Angels circled the block, engines purring low, a protective patrol. Rhett tipped his helmet toward her, his presence a quiet vow. For the first time, Jenna realized their loyalty wasn't a one-night promise. It was a shield built to last, but with protection came backlash. The next week, Jenna found graffiti scrawled across the apartment wall. "Snitch lover." Neighbors gasped, some pitying her, others edging away. Evan hung his head low, blaming himself. "If I wasn't there," he whispered. Jenna knelt, cupping his chin. "You didn't do anything wrong. Standing up isn't wrong." Yet doubt clawed at her as whispers spread around town. At the grocery store, a woman muttered loudly, "That's the one hiding behind bikers." Jenna fought the sting in her eyes. That night, Rhett appeared at her door, silent as a shadow. He studied the spray paint, jaw tight. Without a word, the Angels scrubbed the wall clean, layer by layer, until it gleamed again. "They try to shame you," Rhett said, tossing the rag aside. "But shame only sticks if you let it." Jenna exhaled shakily. Surrounded by 81 men who refused to let her be broken, she began to believe his words. Still, the harassment escalated. A brick shattered one of her apartment windows at midnight, glass scattering across the floor. Rosie screamed. Evan dove beneath the table, and Jenna's heart thundered as she dialed the police. But when the cruiser arrived, the officer only shrugged. "No proof who did it. Best to stay out of it." Rage boiled in Jenna's chest. Stay out of it? She had put herself on the line for a child, and now they told her to be silent. Minutes later, the roar of Harleys filled the night again. The Angels blocked the street with their bikes, headlights glowing like sentinels. Rhett stepped inside, surveying the broken glass. His voice was calm, almost frightening in its steadiness. "They want you scared. We'll make sure they regret trying." Outside, engines revved in unison, a wall of sound shaking the walls. For Jenna, it wasn't just noise. It was a declaration of war against fear. Word of the Angels' presence spread quickly. Some townsfolk began leaving food on Jenna's porch, fresh bread, jars of soup, quiet gestures of support. Others crossed the street to avoid her, unwilling to stand where she stood. At school, Rosie overheard classmates whisper, "Her mom's with bikers." She clenched her fists, but Evan nudged her gently. "They don't get it. Your mom's brave." That evening, Jenna gathered both children at the kitchen table. "This is hard," she admitted, "but we don't hide from doing the right thing. We face it." The kids nodded, their small shoulders carrying more than most adults could bear. Outside, Rhett leaned against his Harley, listening through the open window. A faint smile tugged at his beard. Courage wasn't loud. Sometimes it was a quiet woman teaching two children that justice was worth the price. And that kind of courage deserved to be guarded with everything they had. The breaking point came one Friday night. Jenna closed the hardware store late, her feet aching as she crossed the empty lot. A truck roared up, blocking her path. The same teens jumped out, joined by two sneering older men. "You made us look weak," one spat. Jenna's throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. "You picked on a child. You did that yourselves." They closed in, anger sharp in their eyes. Before she could take another breath, the night exploded with the roar of engines. From every corner of Pinecrest Valley, headlights converged. Harleys flooding the lot until the truck was surrounded. 81 angels dismounted, their boots echoing like a drumbeat of judgment. Rhett stepped forward, towering in silence. The men faltered, their bravado shrinking under the weight of leather and loyalty. Jenna exhaled shakily, her fear dissolving into awe. This wasn't just protection. This was a wall of brotherhood declaring she would never stand alone. The confrontation in the parking lot rippled across Pinecrest Valley like wildfire. By morning, half the town whispered about the sight of 81 bikers surrounding a truck of bullies. Some claimed it was intimidation, others called it justice. At the diner, an old man shook his head. No one ever scared off trouble like that before. But across town, the bullies' families fumed, spreading rumors that Jenna had invited the angels to terrorize people. Jenna sat in her kitchen, Rosie and Evan coloring at the table, when Rhett stopped by. "Rumors don't scare us," he said, sipping the coffee she nervously poured. "Truth does." He slid a folded note across the table, an invite to a town meeting at the community hall. "You'll have to speak. They need to hear it from you." Jenna's hands trembled. She wasn't a speaker, just a tired mom. But then Rosie slipped her hand into hers. "Mama, you already spoke when you protected me." The community hall overflowed that night. Residents filled every chair, some arms crossed with suspicion, others leaning forward with hope. Jenna stood at the front, the angels lined quietly against the back wall, their presence steady but unobtrusive. Her voice quavered at first. "I didn't ask for this fight. But when I saw a child cornered, I couldn't walk away." "None of you should," murmurs rippled through the crowd. One woman stood, tears in her eyes. "My boy was bullied too. I wish I had your courage." Others nodded, the room shifting in her favor. But then one of the bullies' fathers spat. "You're just hiding behind thugs in leather." The room bristled, but Rhett didn't move. Instead, Jenna drew a breath, her voice stronger now. "They're not thugs. They're the reason 2 children can sleep without fear tonight." Applause erupted, drowning out the critic. For the first time, Jenna's words carried louder than the whispers. The days that followed brought a surprising change. Neighbors who once avoided Jenna now left meals by her door. Kids at school invited Rosie and Evan to play, curiosity shifting to respect. Even the hardware store manager muttered, "Guess you're tougher than I thought," before slipping her an extra hour's pay. The bullies, meanwhile, vanished from public eye, their bravado deflated, but Jenna knew better than to relax. Fear still flickered at the edges of her thoughts. That weekend, she opened her door to find Rhett holding a small box. Inside was a silver whistle, its chain gleaming. "If you ever feel cornered again," he said, "blow this. Doesn't matter where we are, we'll hear it." Jenna's throat tightened. She fastened it around her neck, the weight both small and immense. It wasn't just a whistle. It was a promise forged in steel and thunder. And with it, she felt safer than any lock could provide. Spring thaw brought renewal to Pinecrest Valley. The angels organized a charity ride through the mountains, raising funds for a new playground at the elementary school. Jenna watched from the sidelines, Rosie and Evan perched on her shoulders as the convoy roared past, banners snapping in the wind. Townsfolk lined the streets cheering. Even those who once criticized couldn't deny the energy pulsing through the valley. Later that night, Jenna sat by the bonfire the angels built near the ridge. Sparks drifted into the dark as Rhett spoke quietly beside her. "When you stood in that lot, you reminded us why we wear these patches. It's not about fear. It's about standing where no one else will." Jenna stared into the flames, realizing his words mirrored her own life. She hadn't been fearless. She had been unwilling to abandon someone who needed her. And maybe that was the truest kind of strength. The whispers eventually faded, replaced by something far louder: respect. Pinecrest Valley had seen what loyalty looked like, and it changed the town. Jenna still worked long hours, still stretched pennies at the grocery store, but she walked taller now. At school events, parents greeted her warmly, their eyes full of recognition instead of doubt. Rosie wore her bravery like a badge, telling anyone who asked, "My mom stood up for my friend, and the bikers stood up for her." Evan, once timid, began smiling more, no longer shrinking from the world. One evening, Rhett stopped by with a leather patch stitched simply with one word: Guardian. He placed it gently on the table. "For you," he said. Jenna touched the patch, her hands trembling. She wasn't a biker, wasn't part of their club, but in their eyes, she was family. And for the first time in years, she felt like she truly belonged. It wasn't long before the bullies tried one last desperate move. Late one evening, Jenna found her car tires slashed outside the hardware store. She stood frozen in the dim light, Rosie and Evan waiting nearby, fear creeping back into their eyes. But before panic could take root, the rumble of motorcycles filled the lot. One by one, the angels arrived, their presence steady and deliberate. Rhett examined the damage, jaw tight but voice calm. "They're desperate. It means they're losing." The angels escorted Jenna and the kids home, surrounding them like a living barricade. Neighbors peeked from windows as 81 bikers guided a weary mother and her children safely down the street. Jenna's chest swelled, not with fear but with gratitude. No matter what came next, she realized she wasn't fighting alone anymore. That knowledge shifted something inside her. Courage was no longer a burden. It was shared, multiplied, carried on the roar of engines. The next morning, Pinecrest Valley gathered in the square. The angels stood in formation, their leather vests dark against the morning sun. Rhett spoke first, his voice gravelly but resolute. "You've all seen what happens when someone dares to care. Jenna didn't ask for us to ride in, but she earned it." Then, to everyone's surprise, Jenna stepped forward. Her hands shook, but her words rang steady. "I'm no hero. I'm a mother who couldn't stand by when a child was hurt. None of us should." A hush fell, broken by applause that grew until it filled the square. Rosie clapped with all her might, her cheeks flushed with pride. Evan lifted his chin, finally unafraid. In that moment, the town saw not just a struggling single mom, but a woman who had lit a fire in 81 hardened bikers, and in all of Pinecrest Valley. As days turned into weeks, the story spread beyond the valley. Local papers ran headlines: "Hell's Angels protect local mom." Photos of Jenna with Rosie and Evan, flanked by leather-clad bikers, circulated far and wide. Strangers began sending letters of support, some even donations tucked inside envelopes. Jenna used every dollar to repair the damage, but also to help others, quietly covering groceries for a widow, slipping cash into the mailbox of a struggling veteran. Rhett noticed. One evening, he said simply, "You remind us why we fight." The angels weren't saints. They carried scars and shadows of their own. But through Jenna, they rediscovered the purpose stitched into their patches: protection, loyalty, and brotherhood. And in her, Jenna found something she thought she'd lost long ago: a community that refused to let her drown in silence. Summer arrived, and with it came a ride unlike any Pinecrest Valley had seen. The angels organized a parade, not of chrome and thunder alone, but of solidarity. Families lined the streets, waving flags, children perched on shoulders as 81 Harleys rolled past. At the front rode Rhett, and just behind him sat Jenna, helmet secure, Rosie and Evan on either side, laughter bubbling louder than engines. The bullies who once tormented them were nowhere to be seen, drowned out by cheers that echoed off brick walls. Jenna felt the wind whip through her hair, her heart swelling with something she could barely name. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Her fear had been turned into strength, her isolation into unity. She looked at her children's wide smiles and realized this was the moment they would never forget. The day kindness stood taller than cruelty, louder than intimidation, carried on the backs of roaring steel. That night, when the engines quieted and the streets grew still, Jenna tucked Rosie and Evan into bed. She stepped outside, the summer air heavy with the scent of gasoline and lilacs. Rhett handed her a small leather keychain, the Angel's insignia embossed. "Not a membership," he said softly. "A reminder, you'll never walk alone." Jenna clutched it, tears burning her eyes. She wasn't a biker, wasn't born into their world, yet she had become part of something unbreakable. The whispers that once cut her had been replaced with gratitude, respect, and community. Looking down the street, she saw porch lights glowing in solidarity, a town changed by one act of courage. For Jenna, the message was clear. Standing up may cost you peace, but it gives you something greater, dignity. And sometimes, when you dare to protect the vulnerable, an army rides in to protect you in return. Courage isn't always loud. It's often a tired mother refusing to look away. Jenna's story reminds us that when kindness stands tall, it inspires loyalty beyond measure.